Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall, on the other end, cracking open. You know what it is.
It is.
It's a monster. It's the best one.
It is. It's the watermelon, as everyone agrees to that it's the best one. Kind of.
And I don't know
sometimes.
if this, it's a contention. The only one where it's not like a, what's it called? Most people agree the white one's the best. I think if you go, oh, the white one's the best, most people are going to go, yeah, I agree with you. If you say any other one, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Don't know.
Unpopular opinion, that's the one.
Yeah, I don't know with the white one. Maybe I had it too often in the past. So, which brings me to the first point, Steve. First and foremost, thank you very much. There it is. See, behind the curtain, kind of a secret, a hidden one.
A hidden can.
Yeah, kind of like a drug addict, so that no one is actually seeing your addiction. Brings me to the first point. First and foremost, thank you very much, guys, for the feedback and that you guys are tuning in because you like also the ramble and all that kind of stuff, because it's a little bit of a different format to other fitness podcasts out there. And both Steve and I, we acknowledge that as well. And this is also what we both like about the Improvement Season, where we can just like talk, right? We have two friends meeting up, talking about fitness, but also talking about other interesting topics, at least interesting to us, sometimes not for the listeners. And that brings me to the first point, and this is about caffeine. Steve, you know that I'm a coffee snob. Most people know that. And I think that I'm also a little bit of a hipster. Back in the days, I would have denied that, but I am. Like, take a look at me. And I could easily stand behind a coffee shop desk and actually brew my own espresso and cold brew and all that kind of shit. Thing is, though, that I was wondering, like, recently, whether I should give it a try to have a little bit of a break when it comes to caffeine and see and monitor what my sleep is doing. Just out of experimentation and see whether I have just gotten so used to drinking caffeinated beverages that I kind of forgotten about that it may even impact my sleep. Without me even noticing or knowing, because I'm so used to ingesting that drug. What are your actual thoughts about this?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've had a couple of clients who have recently gone like caffeine free, and I'm like, whenever a client does that, I'm like, why? Because I am similar bias to you, where I'm like, hey, as long as you're not abusing caffeine and you're feeling like you have to have it to get through your day, it's a drug, right? As long as you're not feeling like addicted to that and like you need it, it's a crutch for you to get through your day, and you just enjoy having it, I'm not super concerned about it. I'm like, hey, don't worry about it so much. However, I know on a while back I did some research about caffeine and like just bits and pieces, and there was one study, and this is one study, I don't know how often it's been replicated, but they gave people basically like a single espresso first thing in the morning, and that still impacted their sleep negatively according to their like sleeping records. And I'm
wow,
man.
Do you have some kind of a little bit more details about it? Like, how did they measure it? Was it like a subjective measure? Was it kind of that they've compared our REM sleep, deep sleep, and all those different stages to another?
I have surface level remembering of what it is. I've said that so really terribly. I'm saying it like someone who's sleep deprived.
Yeah, and another topic for Greg the next time to talk a little bit how much caffeine is actually then impacting sleep.
Yeah, I need to look through. I have an infographic on it, and I have like the P mid, whatever it is, the number. Like and then I can go check out the study. But someone like Greg would be better because he has it's like his like wheelhouse, right? So he has a great understanding of it. And I think he's also really pragmatic about things, where he realizes like people are going to have caffeine, and most of the time it's not worth the obsession about it. I also recently did a post about like, do you need to cycle off caffeine to get the benefits in terms of ergogenic aid from it? It's like, if you have a general low dose of caffeine, it doesn't seem like you need to. There's always going to be individual difference though. So yeah, I don't know. The immediate thought that came to mind from me to you in terms of should you try having less is, do you feel like you need caffeine to get through your day? Is there part of you that's like, hey, I think my sleep maybe isn't quite as good because of my caffeine?
That's the thing though, Steve, because I have no reference point anymore. And it's just, if I were to just say it as I think it is, you could easily make the argument that it's an addict justifying his behavior of like me not acknowledging that maybe I have a problem, right? Those alcoholics, for example, like who aren't at the stage yet to accept and acknowledge that they have a drinking problem. They are living in denial. Everyone around them notices that it has an impact, but they don't, not at that current point in time. For me, if I were to argue to you, like, I don't have the feeling that it impacts me. I don't have the feeling that it impacts my sleep. But how the fuck should I know? I've been doing this since such a long time without any breaks in between that I have no reference points anymore. And because of that, because especially caffeine doesn't really have any kind of overlapping effects on your surrounding and environment, where it's like, I don't know, alcohol, of course, impacts your environment to a large and significant extent. And caffeine, like, not really, right? So it's not a problem for other people to notice other than maybe than yourself. And I would say right now, I don't think it has a negative impact, but I would be curious to see whether my sleep, for example, would improve if I were to come off caffeine. And for this, though, what I would need to do is to monitor my sleep now over a longer period of time with the limited measures that we have or tools that we have available, something like a fitness tracker and kind of those sleep gadgets or so, and then have plenty of data points to go off by, and then start to monitor the sleep without caffeine and see just from those metrics points whether it is improving, whether from a perception perspective, it's also, so the subjective perspective on how do you feel in general, whether it's also then improving, and then come up with some kind of decision of whether you want to continue or not, right?
Could you cut out? I need to go back to my previous thought because this is that can come later. With this, yeah, it's interesting. I think Greg has spoken about, and I have it somewhere, it's like a subjective kind of point scoring, like various questions you can ask yourself, like in the morning, to give you kind of a more objective answer to things. It's something I've been using with some of my guys post-show, is I get them to score out of 5, how are they rating on various diet fatigue factors, rather than just talking me through it. I'm like, hey, then I have a score out of, I don't know, it's out of like 20 or something. How like diet fatigued are you? If you're like 10 out of 20, you're still quite diet fatigued. But if now we're on 15 the week after, hey, that's progressed by 5 points. So if you can have something like that, I think that's helpful, because I know a lot of the sleep trackers are almost garbage.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? You could easily then track data points and come up with some interpretation that is completely skewed or wrong. And I don't know if I were to now wake up in the morning, there are just a couple of things that make me a little bit skeptical about how well I'm sleeping. And that is, over the past couple of years, I'm waking up earlier and earlier. Now, you could easily blame it on my age, that I'm just getting older, and that I'm just that typical old dude who's just waking up earlier and earlier, and at some point you're waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning or something like this. But over the past couple of years, there was a time where I was waking up at around 7 a.m., then 6 a.m., then 5 a.m., and now it's on a constant basis like 4 a.m. in the morning.
Is this associated at all with your diet? Did it get worse where you woke up earlier and earlier?
No, it was kind of the same already.
Wow, that's early, man.
Yeah, it is. And I don't want to, you know?
You're not going to bed earlier, I'm guessing.
No,
really?
I'm still going to bed at around like, sometimes, of course, a little before 9, but 9-ish is kind of the time when I'm going to bed. But this ends up with me then being only able to sleep like 7 hours. And I have no real way of quantifying or kind of measuring the quality of the sleep. It's just like me getting up and be like, yeah, I'm feeling either restless or good. And it just makes me skeptical, that my waking hours are always shifting earlier and earlier, and independent of whether I'm trying to sleep a little bit longer or not. And because of that, I'm, of course, trying to be as objective as possible, ruling things out, and trying to find, of course, reasons as to why this could be the case. In itself, also there, I'm very well aware of that if you're looking for patterns, if you're looking for reasons as to why, you will probably find some, but whether they are the actual reasons as to why something has happened may be also up for debate.
Has your caffeine intake also scaled over time? Or has that stayed level? Do you know what your day-to-day, or what you have on a day-to-day basis in terms
I have no idea
caffeine?
about the milligrams or so, but it's for me personally, I always have normally like 3 double espresso shots. So it is not crazy, and also the timing is very, very much the same. When I'm waking up, then at around like 8 to 9 a.m., and then somewhere around like 11 to 12 a.m. And then I'm cutting out the caffeine. But still, as we know, there's still plenty of caffeine in your system still. And on Wednesdays, when we are recording the improvement season, there's a monster for me in it as well.
Does that replace anything, or does that?
Yeah, it is. It is replacing 1 shot of espresso. But to be honest, a can of Monster contains so much more caffeine than 1 shot of espresso does.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like you're having like a crazy amount, but it's like, again, if they're like, half-life differs for people, and actually in your situation it's quite a nice, like, you could quite easily taper down, because a lot of my clients, they'll go like cold turkey. I'm like, man, don't go cold turkey. You can transition out of that. You could quite literally like just move to a single espresso for one of them, and then another of them, and then all of them are just single espressos, and then you could remove one, and then you could remove another, and you could slowly do it that way and see how you feel, rather than like doing it all at once, which would
in itself
suck.
It would also have another positive aspect to it, and that is the financial aspect. Exactly. Like, getting proper espresso beans isn't the cheapest thing, and even though that it doesn't sound like much for some people, it sounds like a shit ton for others, because on a monthly basis I'm probably getting like espresso beans for around like 70 euros, which is, if you really think about it, some people have like, I don't know, a latte from Starbucks on a daily basis, which is a shit ton of money in comparison to what I'm then consuming with 70 euros. But it's still, if you really think about it, it's just for my pleasure of consumption. 70 euros.
I'd say it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the taste. That's also why I do drink espresso, and why I prepare it myself the way that I like and enjoy it. And there are much worse things, in my opinion, that you can spend your money on. And I think that everyone is very much free to do with their money as they please. If you want to spend it on booze because you like it, man, go ahead and do it. If you are a foodie and you are enjoying like a restaurant visits on a monthly basis or so, or a weekly basis, go ahead and do it, right? There's probably, I mean, at some point when it comes to money, you want to die broke and you want to spend it at some point instead of leaving a bunch behind, especially when you don't have kids or so. And there need to be, in my opinion at least, there need to be somewhat of a balance of like savings, but at the same time, some things that do give you a return of quality of life.
Yeah, and I'd say coffee, especially the way you do it, I think like that is like one of the cheaper ways to do it, maybe arguably like quote unquote
That's
better
true.
ways to do it. And there's also health benefits to it in terms of like having like the antioxidants or whatever that's like found within coffee and everything. Yeah, again, I'm feeding our bias here, like trying to help us with that. It makes me think of the money thing as a side note. I don't know if I've said this before, but my gym, Yorkies, doesn't have a seated leg curl. I'm like, man, I'm so tempted. I'm not going to do it because it's absurd. Like, pay £40 a month for another membership at a Snap Fitness, which is literally like 2 minutes walk away, because they just have a seated leg curl. I'm like, I can't spend that much on a seated leg curl.
Hey man, those thoughts I can very much relate to, because my gym, as you may know, they don't really have a good variation of leg machines. And I was even contemplating offering to them of buying a hack squat machine for them, right? For in return, maybe a free gym membership or something like this, because a proper hack squat machine is probably a much heavier investment than paying like $30 per month or so, right? And for this, they then have a great machine there, and I'm benefiting as well in return because we finally have a hack squat machine at the gym. These are just I'm not going to do it, of course, but these are just the thoughts that are running through your head, and I can totally relate to what it is that you are thinking about as well.
You just be like, and no fucker, if I want to use it, no one else is allowed to use this. I got to have priority bookings here. So, oh man, there's, so yeah, with the caffeine, I'll be interested to see how you get on with that, because it's coming off the back of, I don't know, it happens now and then. Didn't have a good night's sleep last night. I woke up twice to pee. I woke up at 6 a.m. and I didn't get out of bed, but I was just like lying, tossing and turning until like 7 a.m. I was just like, man, this is frustrating, but I'm pretty certain I know why. It's because, as we've spoken off air, I'm getting to the tail end of this mini cut, which has been very aggressive. And I just know my stress since basically Sunday has been higher, where I'm just like, I'm struggling with it more than like, I'm actually not struggling, but it's like, I have to try. Whereas before I wasn't trying, and then like training is getting tougher, getting lightheaded in training, like low blood sugar, low blood pressure. And then like sleep is just taking a knock-on effect too. And I'm like, I know it's the sleep is because of the diet. It's not because I did something stupid with, I don't know, caffeine, for example. Like I didn't have like a coffee at fucking 6 p.m. or something.
So because we haven't really touched on the mini cut a lot over the past couple of weeks, we also talked about my mini cut. Let's talk about yours. Where are you at the moment? What was the reason for why you felt that way here in the last couple of days? And what's the plan moving forward?
So my weight has been so interesting through this mini cut, because it's literally been like, I'll hit a new low maybe on Monday, and then the rest of the week it will be like static. And then I hit a new low, static, like it would be a whoosh, like whoosh, stable. So I hit like 185 pounds on Monday, and it's just been static the rest of this week and over that week. And that's how my last few mini cuts have gone. And I don't think I'd recommend this to most people, but I essentially get to like 190 to 195 pounds. It's about 195 pounds is like peak mass. My appetite starts hitting a wall. My well-being starts hitting a wall. My digestion's not good. And then I go into a mini cut and I basically drop 10 pounds within 3 to 4 or so weeks. And that's essentially how this one's gone too. So I'm down again from, I think I hit one weigh-in that was like 195 pounds, a good 2 to 3 pounds dropped off immediately. And then like after essentially on Friday, it would have been 4 weeks of mini cutting, and I'll be down like 10 pounds from over 10 pounds probably from peak mass, because I think I'm holding on to some like, I think I'm due a whoosh to like 183 or something is like my real weight or something. So up until this weekend, it had all been going like super easy, super smooth. I'd actually been enjoying, like I always get this like novelty of having some hunger, enjoying some tastier foods, enjoying just quote unquote like clean bro-ish foods, and just having a big plate of vegetables and some lean meats and just being like, I'm liking this. This is great. Like I don't get stuffed off it either. Just this feeling of feeling empty too. And so, that's been fun. And then it was just this weekend, I just suddenly felt like super, like very hungry, feeling pretty lethargic. And like, that's just hit me the last few days. And there's no real reason for it apart from, I think maybe last week was quite stressful. I had lots of podcasting going on. I think 6 total podcasts I did that week. Obviously not all like there was 4 of them were like with people, but that's a lot for me as someone who's like introverted and used to not like talking to many people. And then my client was here Friday, Saturday, and we trained on Monday as well. And like my sessions were just longer, and maybe push those a little bit harder. Like we're experimenting, like pushing him to failure. I was like, I'll take a set to failure as well, just to like to test him on that front. And they took like double the length of time as they do, because you're chatting, and I wanted to give him time, and I had the time to do it. So I just wanted to be there. And I think that just fatigued me a lot. And then Sunday I was at my parents and just with family, and it was mostly just because we're doing nothing. You're just sat doing nothing and you're chatting. But I'm like, why am I hungry? It's like, because you're bored. That's what it is probably. And so that's just bled into this week, I think. And I mean, getting to 185 pounds, like that's pretty lean for anyone. And it's still pretty lean for me. I think it's towards the lower end of like, I think the low 180s is where I'm like my lower intervention point is, like somewhere around that point. So it's like I have like a 15-pound roughly like range where I feel my best. So I've definitely traveled down to the lower end of that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts now. So first and foremost, what's the next target? One last push before then actually considering going into a contest prep, or making that decision at least of deciding to prep or not?
2 more. So I have time for 2 more. So I have this one after. I'll be able to push up to. It'll be a bit. I'll go slower than maybe I normally would, where I'd push for maybe 1 to 2% of additional weight per month. It'll be 1. I'm normally towards the lower end anyway, so I'm not worried about that. So I'll push again up to about 190 pounds versus like 195. I'll do just a really short mini cut to get me down to like the lower, like mid 180s. Then I'll have another 3 mesocycle push. And I'll get close to 190 or around 190 pounds, which is a good point for me to start prep because it's like around 10% or so above stage weight. So I don't have too much to lose, and that'll be 16 weeks out. Well, I don't know the show dates. So I'm like, it'll be 16 weeks out from if it was this year, if the show dates are exactly the same. So
but they are
from
very
the first
similar.
show. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I have a couple more pushes. And I did contemplate taking this diet, like taking another mesocycle worth of dieting, get very lean, and then going for like a just really slow long mass and then starting prep. But I was like, why would I change my methodologies that I've ran for the whole off season? And also, if I do take it to that lean, I know I'm getting leaner than is productive at this point, and all I need is a mini cut to get me lean enough. Like, so yeah, that's kind of the rationale.
Yeah,
but yeah,
no,
I think
absolutely. Go ahead.
I don't think too much is going to change. I kind of, once this is finished, and maybe after I've eaten a little bit more, I get a bit more glycogen filled and some stress drop off, see how I'm looking, then I'll maybe send out a posing video to a few people and be like, I don't know. I don't even know. It sounds so funny. Like maybe I'll probably just send one to you, Pascal, and be like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Like, shall I bother for next year or shall I not? Because I don't know what I expect to have as a response. I don't know what I'm looking for from people. I think I probably know the answer myself, is like, do I want to or not, really, is what it comes down to.
Because in the end, it won't really make any kind of difference, would it? No. Because either you're already set and convinced that you're going to do it or not. And if you're then seeking for advice and it goes against what it is that you had wrapped out or laid out in your mind, then it just starts to put some doubts in your head, and it doesn't really make things any kind of easier.
Yeah, so that's what I'm contemplating. But I have strongly contemplated reaching out to have a coach for prep, which I wouldn't want to leave too long. I don't know when, as soon as the better, as we know. So I wouldn't want to leave it. The latest I would leave it is as I'm entering that next mini cut, and then be like, hey, this is my plan. I'd start with you maybe, I don't know when that is. It's like around May or something to start prep, and then like just to offload it, maybe learn.
If I was a good podcast host, I would now fish it out of you and ask the question of, who? Do you have any kind of idea who it's going to be? But I'm not going to do this. You will tell us in time. To go back to then the mini cut, because it sounds like the last week was quite stressful for you, and you've been kind of out of your typical environment and also out of your typical routine. How much would you rate that this had an impact on the way that you felt?
Yeah, because it's a hard one. And by the way, a good one to do is like get the listeners to guess. Comment below who you think.
Yeah, that's true.
I think they'll probably get it, because I don't think it's going to be too surprising. But who
do you think is going to prep Steve for the next show or kind of season?
And that's if I let it go. Like, it's hard to let go of the reins sometimes. Like, I'm still, part of me is like, I know all the pros of why I would do it. Like, literally, I get that feedback with my clients now, and they're like, I'm so grateful having someone in my corner. I'm like, man, yeah. I mean, I know I'll need someone to communicate to during that time. It's just whether or not how hands-on I want that to be. But anyway, regardless, there'll definitely be someone that I want to communicate with heavily during that time. And then, yeah, in terms of like being out of routine and things, like I don't like to think that it did have such a big impact. And it's hard because it's coincided with having lost the most weight, having trained for like an extended period of time. So it's like it's a confluence of things and events that could lead to me feeling that way regardless of how my routine and things went. But I would say quite a lot. And this seems to be the case, I find, for most people when they've been like dieting for an extended time. Maybe they're close to like overreaching or needing a deload or whatever it might be, or they're getting quite lean. Like once they get out of their usual routines and habits, it just ends up being much tougher than it should be. And yeah, I don't know if you experience the same sort of thing as well.
Yeah, for my last mini cut as well, because funny enough, when you've talked me through your mini cut and what it is that you went through here over the past couple of days, I was just telling you as well that it sounds very similar to what I went through at the last tail end of my mini cut as well, where I then went on traveling, had the tattoo session, was out of my typical routine and environment for a couple of days straight. And after that, I was exhausted and it was so much harder. I had no issues sticking to the caloric deficit, but I was just so much more exhausted. And I can definitely then see, and I've seen it also with many, many athletes who are very successful, and those who aren't really or who are struggling, those are often the ones who have too much flexibility maybe going on, too many unknowns on a daily basis, where they have to be too versatile themselves and adjust on an hourly basis. It makes things so much harder. And it becomes more and more apparent to me that if you can live more like a robot during those times, things will be so much smoother. And it could, of course, be that it's just us, the type of person that we are. I'm very well aware of that. But we've been doing this since long enough, and I've seen it often enough to know that the vast majority of people who never really see the results that they would like to are also the ones who aren't either willing to change many things about their daily behavior, about the daily routine, or they are a little bit more hesitant in changing those things, and where it's a little bit unstructured and too many things fly at them, and they have to then adjust on the get-go without having a plan in place that they still stick to. And often that results just in too many deviations, which then in return makes it harder and eventually leads to them just either burning out or not seeing the results that they would like to. They are getting demotivated. It's kind of sometimes even a combination of all of those factors.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. Like every little bit more advanced you get, the harder it is to make progress, and the more you have to try, and the more you have to get dialed in, and the more you feel it when you don't have those things dialed in. Like I know even when I'm like mass gaining, and like if I'm not in like in week, I always actually look at it this way. You're probably the same as me, Pascal. Like a week one after a deload, which is like always a bit of an intro week. If something's a little off that week, I can manage it. But if it's like almost any other week where it's like, can I skip that rest day? No, I definitely can't skip that rest day. Like I definitely can't like do something that's have no sleep that night. Like I know if that happens, I'm going to have to make a modification somewhere because you're playing with such finer variables and such a tighter line.
On that note as well, now after years having done that, of training at a specific level, and we've even talked about it with Jeffrey about it when he was on, that there aren't really many people who are exceeding the 5-year mark or leading up to 10 years of doing this. But up to this point, and I can now slowly understand why, especially professional athletes, or what they are talking about, that if they aren't doing what they are supposed to be doing, their performance is immediately impacted by that. And I can attest to that myself here in the last week, just as the recent example. After I was traveling and had the tattoo sessions, and the exhaustion and also fatigue was building up quite rapidly, my performance was immediately dipping down, and I couldn't get back to my performance that I had just a couple of days earlier. And this, I think, is then the time where people are starting to lose muscle mass, or at least seeing some kind of detrimental outcome in their results. And I think that I could have still maintained that performance if I had still the groove in place and there weren't kind of any deviations or disruptions in between. It's kind of like a very, very fine line. It's like I don't know, a sound. A sound is a sound wave, right? It's just waving. And if there's just a tiny distraction or deviation with another sound, or you're touching maybe the string, of course, the sound is immediately changing and the waves are kind of all over the place. And it's not the same as anymore, the same frequency as it was before. It's kind of like you are the frequency. And if there are any kind of disruptions, the frequency isn't the same anymore. And getting back is super, super hard.
And I think that is particularly in a mini cut, which is you've always, no, not you have always, I was going to quote you, but it doesn't really fit with where I was going. But a mini cut is aggressive. It's like an advanced tool for people. So if you aren't able to maintain that frequency, and like we've said this before, if you've got like high stress lifestyle, if you've got like a holiday coming up, like a mini cut is not the appropriate tool in that situation. You need something that doesn't put you in such a deficit, because then you can manage these variables to a much higher degree. Whereas like, yeah, one thing off when you're in over 1,000 calorie deficit potentially, you're going to feel that like immediately.
Yeah.
Which is
absolutely
great. Also, it's a good reminder too, because I think like when you feel those small things, you're like, so like when I have this big surplus, so I think it's a good reminder for people, like you can get away with stuff that's like quote unquote suboptimal, which is great in some ways, because then it allows you to live a bit more of a sustainable life in many ways. But also when you nail down all those details that you feel when you're dieting, they are helping you when you're massing too, to get better results.
100%. Let's just have a quick break and then get back to that topic.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Once again, I 100% agree with what it is that you said there, because sometimes in a gaining phase, we may not even be mindful about those kind of things. We just tick off the boxes, we take them for granted. But if you now know how important those are, because you've been proven, or you've basically proven that to yourself in a cutting phase, that if you are misgrooving things, then it has a direct impact on your performance. It will probably also be the same in a gaining phase, but you won't really notice it that much. So you want to maintain that kind of frequency also there.
And I think that's why prep sets up a lot of competitors well, because I think if you can, like I sometimes think about my prep and I'm like, man, I managed to maintain performance on that hack squat for like basically the entire tier of prep. And I was way leaner, like not in a good like state to be able to perform well. Man, imagine how I can like bring that same like intensity and like focus to my off season. That's going to propel me so well. So, because I think a lot of people think about prep as setting people back, but I think sometimes it propels them forward because they get that just like fire under them, and they have to again dot their I's, cross their T's, and that sets them up well. Which is why mini cuts for like the more advanced individual are good like reminders to propel them forward, and used correctly, they should potentiate your mass gaining phase. Like that is the whole point of them. When I hear people go into a mini cut and they're like, I don't know, immediately starving and complaining and their performance is dropping in the gym, I'm like, holy shit, like your performance should not be dropping in. Like maybe at the tail end of a mini cut, you drop a rep or something, but you should not be seeing like huge detriments in performance from like the first few weeks. I'm like, hey, you shouldn't be mini cutting or you're doing something severely wrong.
Yeah, no, 100%. If you feel those impacts straight away when entering a mini cut, you're not ready for a mini cut yet, or in general, a cutting phase. I think it's better than time spent in a maybe less aggressive surplus, or just taking some time at around maintenance to get rid of some of those apparently dietary symptoms that you still are hanging onto you.
Or they just don't have the skill set yet to deal with it. maybe they need to go through just a general cut first and like take it slow and see how they get on with it, and they slowly develop the skill set to be able to handle like going into a mini cut at some point.
No, 100%. There was one thing that you said there that I've totally forgotten, man. Oh, God. Anyway.
It's the lack of sleep.
No. Yeah, maybe it is. Man, now it annoys me that it slipped my mind.
Know.
But it is what it is. One more thing, because Steve, a couple of weeks back, I was reporting about kind of knee issues on the left side and all that kind of stuff. Right, my physiotherapy sessions are starting in September. This is more though for the lateral part of the knee. What I've incorporated now is, as you may remember, a year ago, I've played then with adduction work, so on the adductor machine. What I've started doing, though, is abduction. So abduction, as many people rightly point out.
That always throws me off.
Yeah, totally.
I just say abduction.
Yeah. So because I thought whenever I was moving my leg, I could feel some pressure and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, like, hey, maybe I should do some abduction work to give this a try and engage maybe my glutes a little bit more from a different perspective, because apparently the other thing didn't help. Ever since then, I have the feeling that it's a little bit better. And also, on another side note, and this is just based on observation, I think because I had patella or kind of pain on the patella or underneath the patella as well. Do you remember that I said it when I'm in the deepest position, and especially also when I did kind of bodyweighted squats, where I was saying like, oh man, lateral part now also around the patella as well. And this has dissipated. And I think I know what the reason for this was. And that was too heavy of leg extensions. I would very much attest to that. Wow. Because I didn't really change too many other variables. What I did was, of course, I went from Smith machine squats over to leg press. At first, still caused a little bit pressure, but I could tell already that it's improving my situation. And while doing the leg presses, I didn't really feel any kind of discomfort. So I thought that this is already a better option to do. And when it then comes to the leg extensions, I just readjusted the weight and also the repetition range. I upped the repetition range, went all the way to 21 repetitions. Of course, by that, reduced the load significantly. I took even more time just on the eccentric and also the concentric part of the lift. And ever since I did that, over then a couple of weeks now, of course, it didn't really go away straight away. But I could tell, like, marginally it's getting better. And now it's now at a point where it's actually fully improved. And
good.
Sometimes you don't need that immediate relief or immediate kind of, I don't know, professional help or so. Sometimes you can just like play a little bit around, make some modifications to your training. If there's anything that can potentially cause discomfort, so let's just say for you, for example, when it comes to bench pressing, shoulder aggravation and all that kind of stuff, then you make some modifications, maybe tweak things and maybe swap out that exercise, see whether things improve over a longer period of time. Of course, you don't need to expect immediate feedback there as well. And then you can build a better report for yourself already, right? And then you're more knowledgeable about what works for you and what doesn't. And I just found it interesting, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because there have been so many instances in my lifting career, and probably in yours as well, Steve, where just through manipulating variables, testing things out over a longer period of time, you've figured out what really works for you and what doesn't. And you don't have to be the analytical master writing everything down. It's just like observation over time.
Is there anything that clued you into it being the leg extensions? Is there something that led you to manipulate that one in particular?
I mean, in this stretch position, sometimes I had a little bit of a discomfort when I'm very much fully in the stretch position, because what I'm doing is I try to get as much knee flexion going as possible on the leg extension. And I sometimes intentionally squeeze my butt cheeks in the stretch position, because I have the feeling that it even gives more stretch on the quads as well. It just gives me a very good sensation. And sometimes in that position, I could just feel that it puts a lot of tension on my knee. And I was using a lot of weight, but still, I can definitely also say, looking back on also the form videos, it was controlled, but it was maybe just too much for the connective tissue and joint for that time. Maybe with also then the other variables as well playing into that.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I know I was having knee pain with the Watson pendulum squat, and I just had to move away from that. That can often cause people issues. And then I went to like Smith machine squats. I came back to the hack squat after a long time off it. And I went back to like the previous loads I was using. I was like, man, I'm getting this discomfort below my knee. And I just changed the technique and form to control it more, take more time, lower the load, of course. And it's like, hey, it's dealing with it fine now. I think often, and that's seen in the literature as well, right? Where like load is quite often the thing that leads to like joining connective issues versus like other variables. And that's why it's like not a bad idea to manipulate things so you can challenge the muscle more with less load, because then you're not necessarily getting those niggles and injuries as some people can. Not to say that you'll ever not go back to loading it heavy again once it's like recovered. It's just a case of like pushing and pulling when it's appropriate.
But also there again, right? What is heavy loading? I mean, if we're then talking about a difference between a repetition of, 10 reps versus 15 reps or so, does it really make that much of a difference? Not really. And also we know from the scientific literature, at least, that there's not that much of a discrepancy when it comes to hypertrophic responses. And I would be very surprised if it was, because just from anecdotal evidence and also just listening to your body and feeling things out, I would be very surprised if 10 reps give me better hypertrophy than 20 reps on certain movements, not at all of the movements, of course, right? Because I think that there's just something to it with certain particular movements, loading them heavy just gives you something that higher repetition ranges often don't, but also vice versa. It's the other way around as well. If I were to do something like a leg extension in the lower repetition range, it wouldn't really feel great. Whereas going up to 20 repetitions in a controlled manner, holy cow. It's awful. But also, to be fair, in the past, I never had the feeling that it was productive for me on the leg extensions to go all the way up to 20 repetitions. Now it does. And I don't know whether you can call this kind of maturity. You have a better way of engaging more muscle fibers and motor units, maybe. And that's why you can get more out of their movement, even with then higher repetition ranges and stuff like this. But it feels great for the time being. And I think that whenever people are talking about repetition ranges and also what loading range you want to be in, it's often overlooked about the individual differences and also the overall health and well-being for certain individuals. Because if you've been doing this since like 10, 15, some people even 20 years, then I don't think, or I very much doubt that you are a special snowflake that doesn't really have any kind of niggles, pains, or some discomfort in certain repetition ranges or anything alike.
Yeah, I think I view rep ranges almost can be a little bit viewed like exercises, where we just have lots of different tools at our disposal that might be suited for certain individuals at certain times. It's the same with like rep ranges. There is not this hypertrophy specific rep range that's really tight and small. It's like, hey, no, it's a wide swath that you can kind of pick and choose depending on, again, the person, the situation they're in. And I'm the same as you in terms of like isolation based movements. I can't imagine going below 10 reps, like on a leg extension. Even 10 reps is like a first set feels like, I don't know, I haven't done a leg extension that heavy because I'm like, hey, I do that on like a big compound lift versus a leg extension. And I love the higher rep stuff on leg extensions. I love them and hate them at the same time, but they blow the quads up.
It's funny though, Steve, and I don't know how it is with you and how you feel about it right now, but there was a time where I was so convinced that you have to be at a lower repetition range, that it's more hypertrophically stimulating and all that kind of stuff. And it's probably also fueled by certain things that you're seeing online and certain crowds as well that you're seeing online, that you always, sometimes even right now, you're going back and think, there must be something to it that I'm missing out if I now go above a certain repetition range. But my training has shifted towards more so being on average in the 10 to 20 repetition range on the vast majority of exercises, because I just feel that it's better for me. Like I can't really quantify it from a hypertrophic perspective. I mean, my physique has improved tremendously, but I don't know what it would look like if I were to still train in a lower repetition range. But what I can say is, from a connective tissue perspective, from injury perspective, it just makes me feel healthier, and it gives me a better sensation, gives me better pumps, all that kind of stuff. It just makes my training feel better. Whether it is then, from a hypertrophic perspective, more stimulating or not, in the end, doesn't then really matter, because if the other one is more stimulating but causes me to, I don't know, feel awful afterwards, feel completely disrupted, and disrupted not in a good sense, but crippled that I can't really walk because I have so much connective tissue, is it then worth it? Not at all, right? So I think that even if there is potentially a little bit more hypertrophy in the lower repetition range, which I still doubt that there is, but let's just theoretically say there is, it still doesn't really outweigh the benefits that I'm getting from a little bit of higher repetition range or medium to higher repetition ranges.
Yeah, I really like that thought process in terms of, I just like the idea of what we have from like the scientific literature is some like broad stroke recommendations. And then you go in there and you try stuff out and you figure it out for yourself. And I like using these like short-term heuristics, like the proxies of like, hey, how stimulated did that feel? How much of a pump disruption? Did I get sore? Did I just feel it in the joints and connective tissue, or systemically just trashed? Like, that's how the bros would have done it back in the days when I think about it. Like, if you just think they had nothing to go by apart from, hey, what feels good in the muscle? And they did a lot of things pretty right, not everything. And so now we have a little bit more literature to give us like bumpers to work within, but then you can work within these bumpers and find, because you might find that suits you now, but I don't know, a year down the line, you might be like, hey, actually, I'm now over here. And then it's just like I move over here. So
100%.
I think what you mentioned there in terms of like, it just feels super productive. I think that's the thing to go by, because I think there probably is many roads to roam, and so long as you're moving towards that in a way that feels super productive to you, I can't argue against that at all.
Exactly. And also figuring out what kind of body parts are more so tailored to what kind of repetition range is also something that I've kind of get a better handle for as well. And that is especially like for the back movements. I know, for example, that I have a better time stimulating kind of my muscles in the lower to medium repetition ranges for my back. Whereas for example, now the legs, I want to be more so in the medium to higher repetition ranges because it just feels better. And if you don't have those data points and you're still figuring it out, then you need to, of course, have a bigger variety of, or a bigger range of repetition ranges to play with, to develop those skills, and also to get the data points to figure even out what feels better for you in the first place. So I think that it is as with everything. At first, you want to be kind of as broad as possible with also the training protocol that you're running, so that you can narrow it over time to really tailor it to your needs and what feels good to you.
Yeah, I think experimentation is underrated in general. People want the prescription, they want the answer, they want their guru to tell them, hey, no, it's 8 to 12 reps, do everything in that rep range. And then it's like, they just trust that person blindly. And it's like, hey, how's it feeling to you? Terrible? It's probably not working very well for you, no?
Yeah, no,
it's
absolutely.
Like, I know for the longest time, I don't know, someone might look at like the RP guys, Mike Israetel, like they really like bent over rows. And I almost would program for clients because I'm like, I really like them, they really like them, they get on with them. But then some of my clients would be like, hey, I don't feel it at all. And I'm like, if I just went by, hey, just trust me and trust this, like it's working for us, it's got to work for you, then like I would give them the wrong exercise. They're better off with a chest supported variant, assuming we've troubleshooted it to make it as good as possible. Like, I just think that's like, you got to listen to what's going on in real time.
It's funny because
people aren't very good at that.
That's the perfect example between the two of us, Steve, because I haven't done bent over rows since like, I think 2021 or so, because it is simply not my exercise. That doesn't mean that it can't work now, because of course you evolve as an athlete, You get a better engagement as well. You have a better skill set of making exercises also work for you. And then maybe after a while, you can come back and then all of a sudden it's the exercise for you. But I haven't done them since like 2021 because it just doesn't feel great to me. Chest supported rows, for example, is just way more my jive. And I know for you, though, on the other hand, bent over rows give you a lot.
Yeah, I haven't not done them basically since like 2016 or something like that. I've always had a variant. Part of me is like, maybe I'll just drop them at some point. But I'm like, if something's working so well, especially now, it's like even length and partials of them feel even better than they were previously. So I'm liking that. But yeah, I'm similar to you in terms of rep ranges, by the way. Like 10 to 15 is like a big sweet spot for a lot of things. But I was interested to hear, and it might be something I experiment with because I haven't experimented with hip hinges above 10. I've maybe gone to 12 a few years ago, but I haven't gone above like 10 repetitions for hip hinges for ages. I was always like 5 to 10 reps, basically. I'm interested to hear where you're at with that, if you're currently doing one or which one you're doing.
Funny, because sometimes, Steve, I have the feeling that we are coming to kind of the same spot at the same times without having talked about it. And that happened often already in the past because we are, of course, following the same evidence and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes we're coming then to the same conclusions at the same time without having interacted or talked about that topic. Because right now, when it comes to hip hinges, I've always been in the 5 to 10, 5 to 8 repetition range myself. But since the lateral knee part or the pain that I'm experiencing there, whenever I go down into a deep hip hinge, so especially like deep RDLs, deep SLDLs, it really gives me like a sharp pain. It's not on every rep, but sometimes it just snaps and my left leg is nearly caving in because this pain is so severe. And because of that, I want to do hip hinge movements. And right now I'm experimenting with what is it that I can do. Right, so I've been experimenting with different forms of free weighted RDL or SLDLs in different repetition ranges. I've played around with Smith machine. I'm right now experimenting then on that kind of deadlift machine where you also then can do the Bulgarian split squats on. And especially like on the Smith machine and also the deadlift ones, I am doing in the 10 to 15 repetition range so that I really can try to load the hamstrings and the glutes as much as possible. It's kind of like more of an isolationish kind of movement then that I'm trying. And it's kind of the same with the leg press in comparison to barbell back squats. Barbell back squats, probably better tailored and suited in the 5 to 10 repetition range, maybe even lower than this. Whereas leg press, everything below 10 repetitions doesn't really feel great. And it is first maybe counterintuitive because it's also a deep knee flexion movement, but it's then the same there as well. RDLs, SLDLs, everything beyond 10 repetitions becomes a little bit meh sometimes. Whereas then with those movements, switching over to something like the deadlift machine or Smith machine RDLs, so it felt just so much better doing it in the 10 to 15 repetition ranges. I don't have a full conclusion yet, because I'm still in the process of experimentation. But I can at least keep my legs way more straight, really put the emphasis on the glutes and the hamstrings, and then I just have to figure out whether it is worth it or not. But funny enough that I am right now experimenting with it, and you have contemplated in maybe experimenting with something like this in the future.
Yeah, I think that's well said in terms of using those machines and those being more applicable to a higher rep range, because I think probably similar to the belt squat machine that I'm using for it, the stability it gives when you're performing it is just like so great. So that I can imagine doing a higher rep range being more tenable, because often you don't do the higher rep range because the lower back starts becoming clearly the limiting factor and it just doesn't feel great. I guess some theorize the hamstrings I have generally faster twitch muscle groups. They respond better to those lower rep ranges. Potentially, it's more of a hypothesis. And I've always kind of stuck to that too. And so I don't think I've ever gone, I maybe have gone to 15 reps like now and then, but very rarely. But I might try just increasing reps and not load. So I'm up to like 15 reps on the belt squat because my hamstrings, similar to yours, our hamstrings don't get like, some people get like severely sore from hip hinging. I've never really got severely sore. I get a little bit of tenderness when I've really pushed hard, but like it's probably recovered after a day or so. And so I'm just like, maybe the higher rep range will just give me, not that soreness is the be all and end all, but maybe I'll just get a bit of added stimulus from that rep range. So I might try.
And these are the moments where you are starting to question yourself, your approach to something like the hip hinge movements, and also whether your form is appropriate or not, right? Because when other people are reporting massive hamstring DOMs for days from like 1 or 2 sets, and you're just like, am I doing it wrong? Do I still have a little bit too much lower back rounding? Let me just check. And everything is fine. You're just like, what's going on here? You know? And I think it's then that point in time where you have to just be a little bit bold and try to experiment, because in the end, you have nothing really to lose. You're still doing resistance training. You're still inducing hypertrophic stimulus. And it's not that you are going from it's a meh exercise, not really feeling it in the hamstrings, to doing or inducing no hypertrophic stimulus at all. You can basically only win because you will only learn something new about yourself and about those body parts and exercises.
Yeah. Sometimes it's funny because I will question technique too. I'll look at some of my clients' technique who are getting like crazy soreness, and I'm like, not to be harsh, like their technique, like I'm getting more range of motion, my hips are staying in a better position, like their technique is good, but like they're not getting the craziest stretch or anything. They're getting crazy DOMs. I'm like, man, I think there's just, again, it's don't focus on one variable too much. I kind of accept that maybe I just don't get that much soreness in my hamstrings. I just don't focus on that because you can't. We've discussed this before, like soreness it's one maybe helpful heuristic to be aware of, but definitely don't set up your program to just get as sore as possible. That doesn't make sense. Some muscle groups just don't get sore. I always think about my biceps and like they grow super easy from barely anything. They never get sore. Like, so I don't need to stress about it. But with the hamstrings, they're a bit of a tougher one because your quads, they might not get sore, but they get crazy pump. Like they get that short-term proxy. But hamstrings, it's just like, I'm progressively overloading it. I know that, like it's improving over time. I'm adding reps or load. But like I'm not getting, there's no short-term things to give me feedback apart from I can feel the mind muscle connection, or it feels a bit tired, but like, you know what I mean? Like the short-term heuristics for hamstrings aren't the same as like a quad or even your back, which doesn't have amazing like pumps and stuff. You still get something from that.
Yeah. I envy you for the belt squat machine that you have in your gym. Not only, of course, for doing belt squats, but also then for the RDLs as well, because it just, I think it's the probably or possibly the best substitutional exercise and doing it in the best possible way of doing an RDL or SLDL, because you can really move around freely. You can really put a huge emphasis on then the stretch portion of the lift, and nothing is really in your way. And I would love it to be the case, because with the deadlift machine, it still feels a little bit odd from the movement pattern, because it's kind of a little bit of a curved movement. Same goes then for the Smith machine. We have an angled one, we have a straight one, and both don't really match my movement pattern. And with a cable, of course, you still have a little bit more of leeway to play with. And yeah, I envy you for this.
I don't know how long I've been running it, but I'd be pretty confident to say it's been over a year that I've just been progressing it, and it just hasn't slowed down. It just keeps and keeps improving. So if I don't have like really good hamstrings by the end of this, then maybe you can take back your comment. Again, on hip hinges, it's another one of those movements where they are a little bit unique in that, like gauging reps in reserve is an interesting one, because I think it's something, at least for me, I feel internally when my back is like taking over. You know, when you're like straightening and you're like, my back is finishing the majority of this. I'm very close to like, hey, my hamstrings are not the limiting factor here anymore. And I end it basically via that versus I can't pull it up at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've talked about it endlessly already when it comes to kind of pulling movements. I'm implying back movements, hamstring movements. They just are more so an internal thing rather than an external thing. Whereas then chest, and also just pushing movements in general, you have a little bit of a better gauge, in my opinion, also from an outside perspective, to see when you're getting close to a failure point. And yeah, with the pulling movements, it's more like an internal failure point where you can just like tell, all right, if I now go for that next rep, I will probably deviate in terms of my form, or I will start using too much momentum, that also by that in itself, I'm probably just adding more and more fatigue while getting less and less of a stimulus in return.
Yeah, for back ab, especially when you're using full range of motion for back, it's a bit better with partials, I find, because you don't have that urge to help the hardest position and jerk. You have less of that going on, and it's a bit more of a clear failure point, but exactly the same with those for sure. And the only other thought I have on hip hinges is, I don't know what it would be like, I haven't done it yet, is lengthen partials on hip hinges. I'm doing relatively soft lockouts on them. I'm trying soft lockouts on a few things, and that's one of the ones I'm trying it on. And it feels really good on that machine. I don't know how it would feel with maybe on dumbbells, barbell, I don't know. But yeah, lengthen partials on the machine I think could work well, but I've seen Milo Wolf doing lengthen partials on a barbell. He was doing a deficit barbell straight leg deadlift, and I was just
his mobility is also crazy. I don't know what it is with his body. Honestly, huge, tall guy, and also the mobility. What is wrong? I mean,
yeah, he was built to lift.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. We're coming up on time. Anything to report, Steve? Anything to let the listeners know?
No, I guess the only thing is we still have tickets. I say no, yes, we do, because we still have tickets available for the. I keep wanting to call it the London seminar, because that's always what we've called it, but there's no seminar at all. It's just a London training weekend, really, I guess, with the guys from RP. So if people want to book in on that, if they're not aware, we changed the setup a little bit to be, I think, just way better. So if you aren't aware of the change that we made, definitely check out the change, because it might have been a change that is warranted. For you to then get a ticket and get a spot, and you get a big discount if you book multiple slots as well. So that's a worthwhile thing to look into as well. So yeah, I'm excited for it. It's all going to come way quicker than we intend to, but yeah, it's gonna
nearly a month to go. It's crazy.
Yeah, almost a month out. Yeah.
Right. Anyway,
but that's it, I think.
Absolutely. You can find links in the description below. Other than that, guys, thank you very much as always for tuning in. Thank you very much for the kind comments as always. And I guess I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.